Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies, and in this video we'll continue with the Rosicrucians, What They Are and What They Are Not by R. Swinburne Clymer. Present day emblems of the legitimate order. The Rosy Cross, early history. Christian Rosicrucians. The beginning of the Rosicrucian order or fraternity as such dates from the 17th century when Jonah Valentine Andrea, not Lord Francis Bacon as erroneously claimed by some uninformed writers, signing himself as Christian Rosicrucian, published a number of pamphlets dealing with the mystical teaching of societies, the Hermetics and Paracelsians, then in existence but of which little was known. The mystically inclined at once seized on the name, and the Hermetic body became known as Rosy Cross. There are various forms and usages of this name, such as the Order of the Rosy Cross, the Golden and Rosy Cross, the Red Rose and Golden Cross, the Temple of the Rosy Cross, the Fraternity of the Rosicrucians, the Rosicrucians, the Rosicrucian Order, the Brethren of the Rosy Cross, the Rosicrucian Brotherhood. All of these are protected by usage, and though synonymous, there is a shade of difference in their signification, and they apply to different phases of the great work. The use of the terms society, fellowship, college, Latin or Greek translations for the Rosy Cross or Rosicrucians, prefixes or suffixes, are merely subterfuges used in an attempt to prevent the legitimate order from obtaining justice or protecting sincere seekers from being misled or defrauded. In the book The Fraternity of the Rosicrucians, when the textbook The Fraternity of Rosicrucians was first published, there was but one Rosicrucian body in America, that founded by Dr. P.B. Randolph under the law and usage, and that of the spiritual hierarchy governing occult affairs. This was and still is the legitimate body, with the exception of one instance, since become void. The body has given authority to no other association or organization. Issued by the legitimate order, bearing date 1906 and fully copyrighted. The author then recognized as an authority on the subject. The mystery was explained, and it was clearly pointed out the signature Christian Rosicrucians meant Christian Rose Cross, by which the name of the fraternity was to be known thereafter, so that all the misconceptions may be avoided. It is necessary to repeat that book was copyrighted and copies duly filed in the Library of Congress, and that years later, two men, the founders of the clandestine organizations, styling them Rosicrucian, deliberately used this matter as original with themselves and without giving credit to the writer who first solved the mystery and gave it to the public. The proofs are filed in the office of this publication for inspection. Grades in the hierarchy. The Rose Cross. The Rosicrucian order, august as it is but the first grade or step in the spiritual hierarchy. The Rose Cross is the primary training school wherein is taught a sublime philosophy, a law of justice, the principle of compassion, the necessity of manhood, and non-interference with the rights of other men. In its training, the Rosy Cross leads the gross man by degrees from the purely physical carnal to the verity of the spiritual. It instructs man in the progress of transmutation, so that he can by his own effort transmute the base into the fine, the dross into pure gold. This process gradually results in illumination. Man proves to himself through this method that he does possess a soul, and the location where the soul or the living fire has its center. Man became a son of the gods, and his next step is to contact the hierarchs in the heavenly realm. He has attained the first degree. He has become, not made, a Rosicrucian, and thenceforth he is a brother of the order. The Rosicrucian order, a school. The Rosicrucian order has been since its beginning in the past ages, and especially so since the change from an Hermetic appellation to that of the Rosy Cross, a school of philosophy and divine science, and a training center for spiritual development. The whole aim of the ancient brotherhood has had in view the transmutation of the gross carnal man into a highly developed spiritual, albeit practical, normal being. It has for its great work the spiritualization of the material, physical man so that illumination or initiation may take place, and that man may find himself a living soul. The Rosicrucian order is, we repeat, a spiritual school, and as pointed out by one who signed himself Christian Rosicrucian, aims at a spiritual marriage, the balancing of the spiritual and the material within man, which is to make him both man and as one of the gods. Imperial Eulis. Man has now but entered the sacred sanctuary. Only the first step has been taken. He must press onward and forward. If he stops here, he will stand still, and though his work has not been in vain, he has not yet attained the goal which is beckoning him on. If he is sincere, if he has the persistence and the courage, the deep desire and great love, then gradually he enters the realm of Imperial Eulis. And if he is faithful, he will be able to contact the hierarchy. Here he enters the grade of the second degree, again made possible only through his own efforts and inner growth. Here greater secrets and ancient teachings are confided to him, as were not possible in the first degree. But he is yet a long way from the top of the ladder. He has attained the second degree, it is true, but the exalted third is still to be envisioned and worked for, and to be accepted as a master there. Much is to be done and overcome. Imperial Eulis is the term generally used. Synonymous titles are the Brotherhood of Eulis, the Hierarchy of Eulis, the Triple Order, the Grand Hierarchy, the Imperial Order of Eulis, etc., all of which, like the Æth Priesthood, are the exclusive right of the Grand Fraternity by the right of the dissension of authority, long usage, priority of establishment, and as now protected through their membership in the Royal Fraternity Association Incorporated. The Æth Priesthood, towering above both the Rose Cross, whatever its nomenclature or designation, likewise above Eulis. Glorious as these are, there is the Æth Priesthood, with its centralized authority and its priesthood, a priesthood since the time immemorial selected from its most faithful initiates. Herein are developed the members who become initiates of the exalted third, and into whose keeping are confided the lesser and greater mysteries, and manuscripts whose contents are little dreamed of by the uninitiated, and who have the privilege of being ordained into the priesthood. Only men may enter here who are willing to lie aside self-conceit, self-opinion, bias, criticism, self-judgment, self-righteousness, and all the other vices of smallness, and who stand ready to help all and condemn none. To the neophytes in the Æth Priesthood is also taught the highest occultism known to man. Sordidness has not reached here. All manner and every form of degradation have been the lot of the Rose Cross due to the abuse of its name and the unholy use made of it by charlatans to cloak every form of vicious propaganda with claims made for it, so foolish and utterly unreasonable that honest students of the mystic and occult have shrunk from publicly therewith, and only the most ignorant have been foolhardy enough to proclaim their membership. The temple of Eulis and the priesthood of Æth have thus far been free from these parasites, and it is hoped that, due to the protection, fraternal and legal, given these associations of men, they will so remain and not be dragged into the mire as has the Rosy Cross. The authority, as in the Rose Cross, where authority is conferred through two channels, so which the temple of Eulis and the priesthood of Æth, those aspirants who seek to become members, must first enroll as neophytes and must become proficient in the history and the philosophy of the order. For the fraternity seeks only those who truly desire to become masters, and accepts none who, due to ignorance, would be mere appendages, slaves, followers. These applicants must pass, therefore, through the trial chambers of development. When they have finally attained their full status as members, earned by their own deliberate and conscious efforts and inner growth, they may be appointed as teachers and priests. Thus it will be recognized that men must be prepared within the school, thoroughly trained in every department of the great work, and then through a line of descension as from Grand Master or authorized teacher to the next in line receive authority. The number of degrees. Seekers after truth and initiation have been offered by pseudo-teachers the privilege, through the payment of certain fees or dues, large or small as the case may be, of being initiated into 1 to 12 degrees, each one of which was supposed to make the applicant a member of the order and therefore a Rosicrucian. Such a procedure is a parody on all that is sacred and sublime. Though a man were to be initiated into 1,000 ceremonial degrees, he would be no more a Rosicrucian than he had been before the initiation. A man cannot be made a Rosicrucian. He must become one through a process of inner growth, a spiritualization which is known as the transmutation of the gross into the fine. In no other way than by growth and actual inner development does one ever become a Rosicrucian and a member of the august fraternity. The true Rose Cross consists of but 3 degrees or 3 distinct steps of growth, the highest of which is known to the true student and seeker as the exalted third. In the first degree he finds his own center of light, gains the absolute knowledge that he is a living soul. In the second degree he comes into touch or communication with the spiritual hierarchy of the fraternity and receives the knowledge of the contents of ancient manuscripts dealing with these subjects. Of the exalted third, nothing may be said. The conferring of degrees. The true Rose Cross, like every other organization of men, has a history, but nowhere in its records, whether written or handed down by word of mouth, is it discoverable that the order ever attempted to make Rosicrucians by conferring symbolic degrees through the medium of lessons or a ritual of initiation. No man, irrespective of how great or good he may be, can be made a Rosicrucian by any other man or set of men, nor can any man become a Rosicrucian through ceremonial initiation. He who offers an initiatorial rite as the basis of membership in the fraternity, or who professes to be able to make anyone a member, thereby convicts himself of clandestine practices and of being wholly ignorant of all that concerns Rosicrucianism. There are now and always have been certain ceremonies and rituals connected with the order, and these have been handed down to us from Dr. Randolph and every other Grand Master to his successor, and have been worked in the temple at Beverly Hall. These ceremonies, however, are never conferred until after the neophyte has become a Rosicrucian and passed over the threshold by his own deliberate conscious efforts and through inner spiritual growth. The records of these convocations and ceremonies are held at the sea years before the establishment of clandestine Rosicrucian organizations are to be found in the copyrighted books issued in memoriam of the convocations and are indisputable proofs of the existence of the order. Secrecy and group instructions. In the great work of the fraternity, group instruction is absolutely incompatible with the inner training required of the individual neophyte. Why? Because no two people are alike. One person may be strong in one faculty or emotion and uncontrolled in some passion, while another has conditions wholly different to me. The philosophy of the fraternity is identical for both, but the training is wholly different, and as it is the work of the order to bring about an all-around development of the neophyte, it at once will be apparent that each student must be individually guided and trained, and that this individual treatment is impossible in group instructions or along general lines. Secrecy is essential. Without secrecy, one student would permit another to follow the plan outlined particularly for him, and the danger and damage will be even greater than should a physician prescribe a potential remedy for a patient whose temperature and vitals are subnormal, and that sufferer induce a victim of high blood pressure to take the same remedy. Or as when the psychoanalysis prescribes a course of development for one who is creatively impotent, and that one were to permit a friend exceptionally strong in that development of his nature to follow the same instructions. In either case, ruin would follow, possibly death in one instance and degradation and insanity in the other. The secrecy demanded by the order is for the protection of its neophytes and their fellow men. Silent secrecy. Having the above fact in mind, Dr. Paul Tyner, one of its teachers, said, in speaking of the fraternity, Rosicrucia is spiritual, not material, a fraternity rather than an order. Its members are gathered from the east and the west, from among the lofty and the lowly, the learned and the unlettered, wherever there are free souls and sympathetic and inspiring natures. It embraces all ages, races, and climes, and it reaches from the visible far into the invisible realms of being. Silent secrecy and unpretending good works are its characteristics, and one member may pass his life next door to another, and neither be aware of the bonds between them unless some stress of need draw the curtain aside. The law of silence is particularly emphasized. Obedience to the injunction to enter into thy closet and shut the door, being imperative on all who would have access to the source of power. Those who talk do not know, those who know do not talk. Whoever claims or even admits, except in defense against persecution or fraud, that he is a Rosicrucian or a member of the Rosicrucian order or fraternity, thereby proclaims himself an impostor, a charlatan, and wholly ignorant of the first principles of the order. Even the teachers connected with the fraternity avoid such a claim, and when their connection becomes known, modestly profess that they are humble workers in the great brotherhood. All sincere students, when speaking of the order and its work, will refer to it only as something in which they are deeply interested and which they have found good. Such students will avoid these who wear any form of emblems indicating their connection with any organization claiming to be Rosicrucian, knowing them at once to either be charlatans or those who do not yet comprehend the first of the great occult laws. Know all things, but thyself remain unknown. Insignia and peculiar clothing. The most ancient and universal law of the legitimate order forbids the wearing of any insignia or peculiar clothing, which would indicate that one is either a student or a member of the august fraternity. It plainly declares that he who does so is at once marked thereby as an impostor and a charlatan. This law has never been revoked and never can be, for a spiritual hierarch never declares itself to the profane. Pity, not contempt. Real members, initiates belonging to the true order, who have attained to the status of such membership by deliberate, conscious self-effort covering a period of from 1 to 5 years, and among whom are numbered many belonging to the highest and noblest profession, yet whose affiliation remain wholly unknown to men at large, smile, though with pity, when they hear some foolish, though innocent as to intent, dupe proclaiming himself as a Rosicrucian, and it is a pity that these be thus blinded, for, due to their self-delusion, they may have closed to themselves any avenue where they might enter to become real brethren of the order. The Rose, so blindly ignorant are these charlatans and their dupes of the meaning of the august fraternity that they are unaware that its main symbol, the rose, is an emblem meaning silence. From the earliest time, the rose has been the emblem of silence. Eros in the Greek mythology presented a rose to the god of silence, said to be sub rosa or under the rose, means to keep a secret. The rose cross, mystically interpreted, means to keep silent before the cross. Many are called, but few are chosen. Many who sincerely believe themselves deeply and earnestly in seeking for wisdom and spiritual power apply to the fraternity for instruction and guidance. Of these, the greater number fell by the wayside. Why? because they do not possess the strength and the manhood or womanhood to think, desire, and work day after day for their own purification, inner development, and freedom from slavery to self and others. The path is never easy. There is no one to praise and glorify. Frequently, faults and weaknesses are grievous, and these must be pointed out without mercy. The neophyte cannot immediately see the fruits of his efforts. There is no applause in his favor. He is possibly inherently weak, and as is to be expected of all who are lacking in true worth and manhood, seeks the easier way. These are the men and women who most frequently become the victims of the clandestine organizations who offer them Rosicrucian fellowship, and in connection therewith, the privilege of proclaiming themselves Rosicrucians, if they but enroll for their lessons and contribute the monthly dues or apply for the ceremonial degrees. Teachers and fees. The instructors and guides connected with the great work are business or professional men and do not depend on the great work for a salary or any part of their livelihood. All that they do is done because of their love of the work and their desire to help along their fellow men. As in every honest endeavor, as even the most unselfish charity with which an expense is connected, there must be a financial return or nothing can be accomplished. The great work in its financial department is based on sound, honest, and straightforward business principles. There are neither monthly nor yearly dues. The actual expenses, such as for the issue of lessons, the publication of necessary textbooks which teach the philosophy of the order, and the vast amount of correspondence necessary, is in part defrayed by a fairly correctly proportioned donation required from all sincere students on enrolling. The balance necessary is covered by the tithes received from members and students who are deeply interested in the welfare of the work and highly appreciative of the benefits they receive. Wisdom cannot be sold. Wisdom, spiritual truths cannot be sold. The order has no truths for sale, and the enrollment donation does not cover a sale of lessons or a system of training. It is required merely to cover honest, legitimate expenses connected with the work. The modern paper house does not furnish free paper, stenographers and printers do not give their services, nor does Uncle Sam carry the mail unless cash payment is made. The enrollment donation or fee demanded is for the express purpose of covering these and other necessary items. He who is unwilling to help defray these costs is either blind or dishonest, and it is utterly impossible for even the greatest adept or master to bring him into illumination or membership. Something for nothing, impossible. The fallacy that something may be received for nothing cannot be too quickly dispelled. The absolute, undeniable, and unescapable law is equal exchange or compensation. We must, in final analysis, pay for what we get and in proportion as we receive. All honest men and women are willing to comply with this law, and the Rose Cross can be of benefit to no other, nor can it in any way help them. Some to pay, others to benefit. The illogical reasoning that free will of offerings will take care of any great work is wholly fallacious and leads to weakness and degradation. In some instances or in some special work, it may appear to prove profitable to the prompters, but in the great work it cannot find place. Why? Because as stated, we all ultimately must pay for that which we receive, and to accept that for which we have not made a proportionate exchange at once makes us weaklings who shun our duty, and dishonest at heart because we accept that which does not belong to us. And the man or woman who is not honest at heart cannot become an initiate or a Rosicrucian. Even if someone else were to pay, that does not save or excuse the one who receives without making the righteous exchange, though it might compensate the workers or the teachers, and it would, at the same time, make these workers dishonest in that they permitted a wrong. The Rose Cross is based on law, self-endeavor, and above all, self-responsibility. Foreign authority. In no instance and under no consideration may the legitimate Rosicrucians in any country grant authority, a charter, to men in another country to establish a branch of the said order in said foreign country, unless there does not exist in that country an order functioning under the same name or a similar name. For illustration, if there is a Rosicrucian fraternity or brotherhood in France, then the legitimate order in America would not, under the same name, except by the express permission of the order already functioning in France, grant a charter to applicants from France. To attempt to do so would at once stigmatize the American order as clandestine, since it is guilty of not following Rosicrucian law. It is equally true that neither the French, Spanish, or Swiss order, under say pretext, can grant a charter to any man or association of men in America to operate as Rosicrucians, because it is known to all students and provable by published documents that an order of that title has existed in America since 1857. Masons will at once understand this, since each country and state jealously guards its territory and jurisdiction and refuses to permit the establishment of or operation within its territory of associations styling themselves Masons, even though they add ancient or mystical to Masonic, which did not receive the authority from the Grand Lodge of said jurisdiction. As a matter of fact, the leaders of the clandestine Rosicrucian organizations know this to be true and inadvertently admit it in their literature. For example, one of these organizations, when engaged in establishing his illegitimate progeny, made the claim in a magazine published in December 1916 that the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucians was established in America in February of 1915. Its rights and privileges and wonderful laws having been transmitted to the Supreme Council in this country from the order in Europe by the approval of the Supreme Pontiff of the order in Egypt and through the Supreme Council of France. Further, the order itself is international. It has existed since 1500 BC. It now so happens that this pseudo-Rosicrucian body finds itself at odds with another organization, almost as lacking in authority and legitimate existence, but which apparently is making inroads into the ranks of the former by reason of much finer ritual. What is the result? An article published in a magazine November 1927, 11 years later, purporting to give the history of the true order, the same writer says, there are several organizations having such names as, which name could not be incorporated or legally used because it is a name of a foreign body. Thus does the writer convict himself and his own acts, proving that an order of foreign persuasion, whether his own or that of another, cannot have a legal right of existence in America. Incorporation not sufficient. Men who have never been enrolled with the true Rosicrucians, who have received no instructions, much less training in the order, and therefore who could not obtain legitimate authority to establish Rosicrucian centers, lodges, temples, circles, or colleges, have attempted to overcome this handicap by incorporating their association. Incorporation does not grant an authority not previously possessed. To make this plain even to the novice, let us say that a number of men might fraudulently gain possession of the Masonic ritual by eavesdropping or betrayal by a Mason, and could justly claim to be in possession of the Masonic knowledge. Yet the fact that they were in possession of this knowledge and associated themselves together and obtained a state charter under a Masonic name would in no sense give them the authority, the right, and privilege to initiate men and style themselves Masons. The first requisite is that they be legitimately made Masons, that they be in good standing, and that they obtain the rights and privileges from the established authority within that jurisdiction, and then to incorporate or operate, incorporation not necessary, under that charter. To attempt to do otherwise at once makes them clandestine and fraudulent. This identical law governs all Rosicrucian operations and the establishment of lodges, temples, centers, societies, and colleges, and every association of men in America operating under the title Rosicrucian, or one so similar as to be easily mistaken, which does not possess authority from the originally established order, is without legitimate authority, therefore wholly clandestine and operating under false colors. The Rose Cross and Incorporation. The Rosy Cross, being in spirit a spiritual hierarchy, cannot be incorporate as such, since an incorporation at once becomes a business association, from which all secrecy and privacy are eliminated. The order proper is comprised of the supreme hierarch who is known, and the priesthood and instructors who are unknown. And as the latter do not proclaim themselves, they cannot form themselves into a corporation which would at once proclaim them and their association. Any organization which incorporates as a Rosicrucian body thereby proclaims itself as operating without legitimate authority. The only protection the Brotherhood has is the result of prior existence and the use of the name, and of the transmission of authority from one Grand Master to the next appointed by him, and Grand Hierarchs to teachers, and by becoming a member of an incorporation which has in view the protection of its members. As far back as 1909, the Rose Cross became a member of the Royal Fraternal Association Incorporated. This charter was duly filed. Defense and persecution. The Rose Cross, as already stated, being essentially a spiritual hierarch, can neither defend itself against prosecution nor prosecute those who deliberately steal from their name and sacred possessions. For its protection, it must depend upon those who have been selected for that purpose and who are capable of fulfilling this duty to the letter. Thank you for watching, and I will complete this as soon as possible. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment.